So welcome to some D&D stories, and these are just personal stories. I've had my friend Andrew on to share some stories. I've had my friend Rob on to share some stories, and I thought I'd fill in the blanks of where I kind of started D&D for myself, and how much I didn't know, and how unusual it was, and getting the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's a few stories to tell here, that is for sure. And so I got to go back to around 1987. And I worked at a comic book store, just stocking shelves. I stocked comic books to earn comic books. That's what I got. That's what I did. I didn't get paid in money. I got paid in comic books, which was great because I would have spent that money on comic books. And I worked at this great place called West Coast Comics, and every single Friday night, they would all escape to the back right after work, and I'd still have another hour or so before I had to catch my bus, and I'd sit and I'd watch them play Middle-earth, the role-playing game. And it was so fascinating to see all of these adults sitting around make-believing that they're fantasy characters. I thought it was really interesting and fascinating, and some of the adventures and things that they did were incredible. Some of the stories and some of the drunken messes and fights and all this they would do in the game were amazing. And I was like, I really like this stuff. I have to play this game. And I did hear about Dungeons and Dragons. They were staying away from D&D. They wanted to do the alternative, which was a Middle-earth role-playing game. But I finally got a box set right here. This is not my original copy. I got this years later. And I was like, okay, I can play D&D. Who wants to play D&D, everybody? Yeah, you could hear crickets. Nobody wanted to play. Nobody was interested in this sort of thing. I was like, God damn it. It really was frustrating to me. And so I started kind of leafing through everything, and I gotta be honest, I didn't quite understand it at all. I got the idea that there was a dungeon master that kind of told the story, and a player would play through the game. That's about as much as I knew. But I was fascinated. I wanted to play this. So in 1988, in my science class, there was a guy called Jeremy. And we sat next to each other. He's a great guy. He let me copy all of his homework, so I was always good the next morning. He's a really great guy. We really got along super well. And so we're like, let's play D&D. And he's like, I've never played. He goes, let me go and check out all the rule books. And he was a lot smarter than me. He got it like that. He memorized everything, got it. But for some reason, I said, I want to DM. And I always wanted to DM. It just was the idea of creating a world or doing something like that. But the thing is I had no idea, this is 88, how to play the game. I didn't understand the rules. So I remember, and this is something that I will never forget, he came over after school, we went into the basement, and we set up, he had made a character. It was really dark down there, and it was like kind of cool, like it was kind of ice cold down in the basement. And we started to play, in the sense that I started to tell the story, and it was a classic, stereotypical Dungeons and Dragons story in the sense that I said, you're in an underground dungeon, and the water is dripping off the walls, and you see the moss, and as I'm describing this, I could completely see this world, and I really enjoyed the imagination of it. But then it came down to dice rolling and initiative and all of these things that at that time I didn't understand. And I did something that is so funny to me. I completely made it up. I said, okay, roll your dice, and okay, yeah, you hit it. Or, oh no, you didn't hit it. I was one of those DMs to begin with, and I look back in utter shame, but you got to start somewhere. And after that, I was a little bit more interested in the rules and all that. So I started to understand the game a little bit more, and I started hanging out with some guys down the road, the Catos. I've talked about them before, and they had started to play the game, and it was cool. I'm like, oh my god, people I can actually play the game with. That's amazing. Now here's where I get into another aspect of what Dungeons and Dragons was like in the 80s, and a lot of people have forgotten about this. A lot of cool people have made videos on this, and I really enjoy them for doing so. But there was an entire satanic idea wrapped around this game that the media had created. Not the players, but the media had created. There was some people that had committed suicide, and they thought it was related to Dungeons and Dragons through suicide notes. It was crazy. There's a lot more to it. I'm not going to get onto all that aspect of it. But even it affected everybody. Everybody thought that this game had something. You bought into it. You thought maybe there is something to this game. Maybe this is like a Ouija board, but in a game form, like in this. And we didn't quite understand it. And that's what, there was this eeriness to the game. And that's kind of what pulled me in. I was like, this is so fascinating. And I remember my parents going, oh, you want to play Dungeons and Dragons? And I think they were a little bit nervy about it. I'm like, oh, no, it's totally okay. This is going to be the funniest story here. This really is. So at high school, I was eating at the cafeteria, and the best thing that I can figure out is I got serious food poisoning. I was puking my guts out every single day. I hadn't eaten in, I don't know, days upon days. My parents were urging me to eat. I was at home. I was sweating. I was hallucinating. I was in a really bad way. I'll never forget that there was 1 week where I hardly ate because I just couldn't. And any little thing I ate, I threw up. And my parents were getting frustrated, all this kind of stuff. So at my local comic book store, that West Coast Comics, in the window, there was a Dungeon Master's Guide for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And my parents are like, can we get you anything to make you feel better? And I said, well, out of my fogginess, I'm like, there's one thing I would like. And they're like, what? And I said, it's a book. I said, it's not too expensive. It was used. And they're like, what? I said, the Dungeon Master's Guide for Dungeons and Dragons. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they kind of went off, and I forgot I even asked. And I remember, this is no joke, I was laid in bed, like the next day, and I was still so sick. I was so hallucinating. I hadn't eaten. I was dizzy. And all of a sudden, I remember my father walks in, and he's like, John, I got something for you. And I'm like, yeah? And it was something so surreal. I just remember the fogginess of this coming towards me. And I swear to God, I thought it was Satan's Bible being handed to me. And I was like, thank you, Father. It was such a weird, unusual moment of getting this book. It was kind of the neatest way to get it. I was in this hallucinatory state, and look at this. What a book cover that is. I mean, that looks like the opening to the occult, to the underworld, to absolute evil, and I was there embracing it. And I loved getting this book that day. It was like, wow. And I remember reading through it and going, this is deep, man. This is a lot deeper than the original Dungeons and Dragons I was looking at. This stuff has gone crazy. And after that, I started playing with my friends down the road. And I think I've described this a lot of times, is that I was always so excited to play. And I remember my friends, my friend Andrew and stuff, helping me create my character sheet. And it would take all day. And we'd all be so excited. And it took us probably 3 hours to make a character. And we're all, together. And there's like 5 of us. And we finally got down to play. And within the first 5 minutes, everybody started fighting with each other. Every single time. It was so frustrating, and I hated being a player, and I played a paladin back then. And I remember, people like blasting the rules on me, saying, oh, you're a paladin, you're lawful good, you can't do that, you can't do this. And I was just like, oh my God. I hated being a player. I don't know why. I was frustrated with everybody killing each other and rule Naziing, and I was like, this is not what I want out of Dungeons and Dragons. This is not how I envision the game. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start DMing. I'm going to start doing this. And my very first game I DM'd was ridiculous because it was all going so well. And then one of the guys summoned like a familiar dragon, and it got killed by one of the party members or something. And everybody was arguing with each other over if it got hit or if it didn't. And to be absolutely honest, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know if it had hit, if it didn't. I was super confused. And the reality is I should have just made a decision on it. But there was also a small part of me that was kind of a bit of an asshole, that they're arguing and they're yelling at each other. And I sat back and I remember Rob's brother coming up to me. He's like, you really should put an end to this and all this. I'm like, oh, no, just let them go. This is so much fun. And I loved them arguing. It was just so funny about this familiar dragon, if it got its final attack or not, or whatever. I can't really remember. But I just let it go, and I was just like, this is, again, not what I like. And then the next game that we played was where I finally got it. I finally understood the rules. I had complete control of the game, of, all the players. I was telling a story and that they were in, and they were absolutely loving it. It was a story where they came across this like gnome village under the ground, and it was all about them just communicating with these gnomes and trying to get along with them about a bigger evil that was going on. And most of the game, I think 80% of the game, was just sitting there drinking tea with these goddamn gnomes. And I'm doing all this conversation and telling all this history, and I'm making it up as I went along. And it was one of the better games that we ever played. It was so much fun. And I realized that it's all about the imagination. And yes, the rules are incredibly important. And there's been many, many versions of Dungeons & Dragons over the years. But it's an imagination game. That's what it boils down to. And those are some of the fun things that I did with D&D back then. And I think it's okay to jump in and not understand what you're doing. That's completely fine. Bring some friends out, sit with some other people, learn the rules. But that's how I started, not understanding the rules and what the hell was going on. But I still had a really, really great time. And I just wanted to come in and tell a few stories of those today. So anyways, guys, until next time.